All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here for another series from the Smith.ai Masters webinar program. I'm Maddy Martin. I'm the VP of Marketing at Smith.ai. We are a 24/7 virtual receptionist service for calls, chats, and sales outreach campaigns serving small businesses around the country. We do a lot more than answer and transfer calls. We do intake, scheduling, payments, sales lead nurturing, you name it. So if you're interested, get in touch with us and we would love to know how we can support you. Now, today's topic is perfecting your sales process and mastering the art of the close with Morgan Ciani, and she is with Cultivate Advisors. We're going to be hearing from Morgan about sharing the proper amount of information at the right time with your sales prospects, how to identify and embrace the objection instead of always seeing it as a no, how to ask purposeful questions to help you identify if someone is ready to close, and how to adjust on the fly and close more deals. So before we get into the topic today, Morgan, I would love to just introduce you to the group, say a few words about yourself, and let us learn a little bit about you before we learn from you.
Sure. My name is Morgan Ciani, or Ciani, depending on how you want to pronounce it.
Sorry about that.
No, it doesn't matter. It's either Chi or C. I am based in Chicago, originally from New York. I am a cohort leader with Cultivate Advisors and also a business advisor, and I've been with the company for 3 years. In my past life, sales was a major contributor to the success of the company. So I am excited to share the experiences, some of the information and the knowledge, and bring it forward to you guys.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for being here, and feel free to share your screen and let's get into it.
All right, amazing. So let's get in here. This one, sorry about that.
That's okay.
All right, well, welcome. We are going to dive in and talk about perfecting your sales process and mastering the art of the close. Again, Morgan Ciani. And just a little bit about our mission at Cultivate Advisors. We are committed to entrepreneurs and to helping them propel and grow their business beyond expectations. So a huge portion of what we do in our partnership is making sure that we help with the vision, help with the goal, and help the business owner reach that goal in a quick and fun way. Our success with entrepreneurs, a little bit of a high level here. So 43% average top line revenue growth and 65% average bottom line revenue growth. So that profitability, that all comes from, and you'll kind of see as we move forward, that's our lens, starting from financials, which then ties to that sales, marketing, etc. So why are we here today? Purpose is sharpening the sales skills. Outcomes today that I'd like to make sure we get to is we want to identify some gaps in your current process. And then I want to make sure that you guys have some takeaways that will help increase your conversion. So, if you don't have a pen or if you're going to chat it or write it down in some notes on your computer, go ahead and make sure you're identifying some of these takeaways as we go through the webinar, because we'll hit those at the end. So our agenda today, we're going to walk through the buyer's journey. We're going to talk about solutions versus selling. Then we're going to talk about the offense versus the defense. And then we'll walk through those takeaways, as I mentioned, and go to a wrap up. So make sure, my ask is that you stick around until the end. And I'll have you guys share your number one takeaway. And we'll make sure that you gain access to any resources that we can help to accelerate your business. All right, so who is Cultivate? So we've identified kind of a stages of entrepreneurship in in the growth and the journey of entrepreneurs and business owners. So as we look at this, we have that hustler phase, or that, what I like to call it, is the hustlepreneur. That hustlepreneur is like, you're the one doing it, right? Without you, nothing kind of happens. Then we go to the experimenter, where it's like, hey, I'm starting to take some chances. I'm ready to kind of bring that knowledge forward to someone else, and maybe have a hire. Then we go into that visionary phase, where you start to develop a team. Then you go into the systemizer, where the team starts to really develop and you get into more specialized roles. And then you have that influencer phase, where now you're operating sort of at the top here, and less in the day-to-day, less in the week over week, and more on that like quarter over quarter. So let's stop here and take a quick pulse. What stage are you in? So when we look at this, we have that hustler, that's like 200K or under. That experimenter, which is about 200 to 500. Visionary, 500 to $1 million. That systemizer, $1 million to $5 million. And then that influencer exceeding $5 million. Awesome. Okay, so I see we have a lot of those hustlepreneurs. All right. Okay, I'm going to take those results and kind of keep moving here. So as I mentioned, this is kind of that lens, right? Or that propeller, spinning plates, right? There's a lot of ways to look at this. Our methodology is we start from those financials, and then it branches out to either the growth side or the capacity side of the business. Without that financials and that information on the financials, it's hard to determine those goals, those KPIs, those key performance indicators, the metrics underneath that sales propeller or underneath that marketing propeller. So today we're going to focus on sales, hoping that everyone here has an understanding of what their big financial goal is in terms of that revenue. So before we really kick in, I want to dive into this next poll here. What is the biggest struggle you have with sales and closing deals? So it's either sales process, what's that? Or it's, I don't know, my prospects, they come in and then I don't know what happens. It could be, I start talking to people, but then my closing rate is really low, or I don't even know what the closing rate is. Or it could be, I don't really know. I don't even know why I'm here. I'm not sure. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, prospects, that we got a prospect and low closing rate, or don't know what the closing rate is, as kind of our winners here. Okay, great. I'll definitely hit on all of these, but make sure I slow down on some of those bigger percentages there. All right. So here we go. Let's dig in. So perfecting your sales process. There are many stages within that cycle. And so you have to determine within the business and what fits the needs of your business, how many cycles or stages are within that sales process for you. The other piece we want to understand is that buyer's journey, right? So, we have that awareness stage of the buyer's journey. We have the consideration stage of the buyer's journey, and then we get to that decision stage. So before we kind of go and put the cart before the horse, let's understand this part of the process first. So that awareness part, the client realizes that they have a problem. This is where they start searching and looking and saying, okay, I have to find a solution, right? I know that there is a issue, and I'm looking for someone that can help be the solution to the problem. Then there's the consideration. The client understands there's a problem. They start to research ways to solve it. That's when they start reaching out. They're like, okay, I'm gonna start putting together a list or start searching on Google, trying to find someone. And then they come to the decision. This is where they're like, okay, I've narrowed down and I'm going to start making some decisions on not only who I'm going to talk to, or I've talked to a few people and I'm ready to kind of pull the pull the trigger here and go with my decision on who I'm going to work with. So again, let's slow this down and talk about what is your sales process when we look at that buyer's journey. We have to talk about flexibility within this and turn this into a more consultative approach rather than a sales approach. So I guess like the mantra for today is stop pitching and start listening. This is where we want to say, all right, I have people coming into this top of the funnel, which is that marketing portion of that funnel. What we're going to focus on is this middle part of the funnel, which is that sales process. So your sales funnel steps have to be clearly laid out. They have to also you have to adhere to those during your sales process. That can be hard because sometimes we want to close the deal faster than we should, right? Or we want to be less flexible because maybe we have some like deadlines or we have some quotas or we have some goals that we want to hit. That flexibility though, as long as you're clear on the end goal, will actually help you close the deal and make sure that you are presenting the solution to the prospect's needs. So during this time, we want to make sure that we're tracking activity and we want to make adjustments as needed. So, in the poll, there was the question of that conversion, right? Like maybe there's not tracking that's happening right now. And maybe that's why it's like, hey, I don't really know what my conversion rate is. This is this first part of the sales process funnel is where you initially start that tracking. So I always think about sales as a bridge. If you're really rigid, it's going to fall down. It's going to fall apart. Bridges are meant to bend and sway. They're meant to handle high winds. They're meant to handle high traffic. They're meant to handle heavy trucks, right? They're meant to handle earthquakes at times. And so this flexibility and this ability to bend and sway while still getting from one side of the bridge to the other, this is what I want you to think about as we really dive in and talk about the art of sales or the art of mastering the art of the close or mastering your sales process. Think about being a bridge. So again, I'm going to kind of hit this every time. Stop pitching and start listening, right? So selling to the next step sounds simple. It's actually really hard to follow. Sometimes we get super passionate. We're like, I know the answer. I know the solution. I can solve this problem right now. Sometimes that's too quick. Sometimes you don't have enough information. So we want to ensure that the sales process is designed to move in a way that helps and follows the prospect's pace, their decision-making pace. Another example I can kind of give, and this can go kind of two ways on that marketing side or the sales side, is thinking about it from that user experience, right, or the prospect's experience. Think about a mobile that goes into a baby's crib, right? When a parent or a caregiver is looking over the crib, they see one version of the mobile. The child or the baby is looking up and sees another version of the mobile. And so if the product was designed for the parent, the baby would have if it were a bunch of animals, the baby would be looking at the bottom of the animals. If it were designed for the user, which is the baby in the crib, the parents have a completely different perspective. And so this is kind of what I want you to think about when this is what we talk about, ensuring the sales process moves at the pace and at the desired outcome you have, but at the pace for the prospective client, right? So always think about that user or prospective client experience. I'm going to say it again. Stop pitching, start listening. So step 2, we want to identify the actual next step, right? So what is the next step? So it's not the end product or the goal of the service. We then want to determine when and how to tactfully explain or pitch the next step to the prospect. So at this point, it's, hey, so, the next thing we're going to do is this, right? Or we're here talking for me to get the information, then we're going to go do this. So it's kind of, again, keeping those guardrails up on the bridge, being able to bend and sway with what information you're gathering, but also just continuing to take those steps so you're getting from one end of the bridge to the other. Step 3, the ability to appropriately divert or be flexible in order to do what's best for the prospect to keep moving the ball forward. So while maintaining the success and or the vision you have in your sales process of these are the next steps and this is where I need to go to get to the end of the process. So as we look at these 3 steps and you consider your current sales process, what's missing? What are you doing? Do you feel like, hey, I'm actually on track? If you want to go ahead and throw into the chat, I can see a couple things in there. Let me know, how is this feeling so far in terms of what you currently have and what you might need? Okay, so now coming into a little bit of a pro tip, and this goes on to one of the poll questions we had earlier as well, is higher closing rate means more sales, right? Or more product, which means more revenue. So if we took a kind of current example, if a client is valued at $2,000, you have a goal of $500,000 in revenue. The need is 250 clients. If the conversion rate is currently at 30% and the time to conversion is 3 hours within, let's say, the sales process, the total sales is 833 and the total time is 2,500 hours. If we could grab onto one lever in the sales process, once you have hey, I've identified the sales process, I know the steps within my sales process, now I'm going to start tracking my conversion. If we can grab onto one lever in that conversion lever is going to help save you time, which in turn will help generate more revenue, and in turn can help you grow your business because you have that extra time. So what would you do if this conversion rate of 10% happened? What would you do with that extra 625 hours? What could you do with that? And could you get out of the weeds of the business a little bit more? So one of the things we always talk about is, owners working in the business and not having enough time to work on the business in terms of that strategy, or in terms of, maybe it's hiring, like there's a capacity issue and you need to hire more people. What could you, or what would you do with an extra 625 hours if you could learn how to control that lever on conversion? Okay, so you might have saw the front of this webinar here. I went through a little bit of the purpose of today, some of the outcomes, went through the agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about that POD. The POD is really important. And again, I'm going to keep coming back to that bridge analogy, right? It's like keeping those guardrails. And so identifying that purpose, identifying and communicating that, identifying, communicating outcomes, speaking through the agenda, and having that decision is really important in every step of that sales process. So the purpose is going to connect the big picture and the vision. It's going to almost create a little bit of a gap, right? So this is where that slowing down of hey, let's talk about what you need. Let's talk about where you want to be. Let's figure out the gap, right? So where's the solution lie? Definitely want to make it 15 words or less. It doesn't have to be a whole soliloquy. And you want to connect the why. Establish a filter and focus. That's what this does, right? It's okay, here's why we're here in this meeting, in this meeting. Again, remember that statement. It's not the outcome, it's this meeting right now, right? And then it also establishes a filter, so that way everything else can kind of like move to the side here, and we're gonna stay focused. Next is that outcomes. So establish those outcomes. Ask and identify their outcomes. That's super important, right? If you're not on the same page with someone and you just start going off on your own and what you want to achieve, it's likely you'll be on two separate paths. So ask and identify their outcomes. Then don't just answer, validate. Validate what you're hearing. So it's that, active listening, right? And then answer through process. So this is where we want to, in these outcomes, we want to ensure that everybody's kind of on the same page and aligned with what we're doing here in this meeting. And then comes the agenda. This helps kind of line up, and again, the guardrails piece, confirm that the time that all parties have, right? Like, here's what we're doing today. We have 30 minutes. We're going to make sure that X, Y, and Z. You want to give that rough estimated timeline around each agenda item. And then you want to refer to both the outcomes and the questions from yourself as well as your prospect. Last one is decision. This is super important on making sure we all agree, here's what we need to do today, here's what we're going to do next time we meet. Keep this as a filter and a tool that you track. And then this helps manage and simplify those conversations so that people just don't kind of go off the rails there. All right, poll number 3, last poll of today. What is your most common objection that you find when you're on the phone or in a meeting with prospects? Okay, cost. We'll definitely talk about cost today. All right, awesome. Okay, good. So kind of an even split on those bottom 3, but cost seems to be a really big one. Great. We're going to talk about it. So glad to hear that's something that's showing up because this will resonate. Every sale has 5 basic obstacles, right? So it's either, actually, I don't need this. I don't have the money. This is too expensive, or I don't have a budget for it. I was actually just kind of looking around. I'm in really no hurry. Forget it. I decided I don't want to do this. And then there's that trust piece. That's always an interesting one, and that will come up in a lot of different phrases or prospect will communicate that in a lot of different ways. And we're going to hit on that as kind of a bonus tip today, because I think that's super important for us to understand that trust portion. Okay, so how to surface objections. We want to ask direct questions early on in the sales process to start the conversation. So I'm going to give you a quick example. My past life, my industry, my business, my company was fitness, right? An accessory expense for people, right? And so, training, private yoga, things like that. Anytime someone came in, I didn't think they were just like, hey, I'm going to go and look at gyms today. I knew that they were interested. I knew that they were taking the time out to actually physically come into the studio. And so I asked questions to surface those potential objections that we know are the most common, so that I could kind of have those answers and or overcome those objections before I even got to them. So a quick example would be someone would come in alone and they were like feeling really good. They were like, oh, this is amazing. And then we would get to the, all right, well, let's do this. And then their objection would be, I have to talk to my partner or my spouse or my husband or my wife. But one of the questions I would ask in the very beginning was, hey, does your family support you in the decision to like get healthy? Hey, does your spouse or your partner know that you came to look at the gym today? And so then I would turn that and say, hey, I thought that you had this support. Let's talk. So I'd ask more questions, be more curious, right? Because that's the easy objection. Common objection example. Service is too expensive. So this is, again, that stop pitching, start listening. So some proactive, direct questions. Have you done anything like this before? Have you made a purchase like this before? Have you had to have a service like this before? What were you expecting it was going to cost? Like, have you talked to anybody else? Did you have a budget set aside for this? If you did, what was that budget? And then how do you perceive value and or measure ROI for the service? So I guess, like, what would be the outcomes that you were looking for that would make this feel like a good investment, right? So these are really good proactive, direct questions for the common objection of it's too much money. Need time to think about it. That was a big one for me too, in that past life I was telling you about. Need time to think. So, some proactive, direct questions. When did you need this by? Like, is there urgency for this, or do you have a deadline? Do you know when you need to have this? Why is this date important? How do you think a delay in your decision could alter things, right? So if there is a little bit of a deadline, how long is it going to take you to talk to other people, or have you considered that? And are you open to making a decision quickly upon getting all the information you need? So because you have this deadline and because it is really important that you have to make this decision, if you felt like you had all the information, could you make this decision? Okay, so this is another pro tip here. You're not selling the end product or service. You're just getting them to the consultation or the demo or the discovery call, right? You're not asking them to buy the car. They're just going on a test drive, right? I wasn't asking someone to go and change and let's go, we're going to go, work out. It was, are you ready to kind of make a decision to come in for a, free evaluation? So once the first outcome is achieved, you can then focus on the client's next step of your funnel, right? This is building momentum in the process. So it comes back to that slowing this down. What's the user or the prospect need and what do you need to get to that higher conversion rate and closing the sale? So here's a really cool worksheet example in order to make sure that each step in your sales funnel, so remember that middle part of the funnel, each step of your sales funnel, you have an outcome for the step and you understand the objection in that step. So what are your outcomes and what are the objections in each step of your sales process? And if you don't really have one documented, here's a great way to start practicing or start working through this exercise or workshopping that sales process. So, first technique, within the steps of your sales cycle, acronym is LAMA without a second L. So listen, acknowledge, make a statement, ask a question. So we'll go back to that example of it's too expensive. So that common objection, I don't know, the money, it's like too much. All right, well, let me hear everything this person has to say. Let me acknowledge it. So it feels like you're seeing value in the service because it sounds like it's something you need, but we can't move forward right now because of the current price, right? Or the cost of this service or the cost of this good or product. Then kind of make a statement. Yeah, I understand, money doesn't grow on trees, right? I do find though that we're pretty comparable in the marketplace or in the industry, and what we deliver and how the results that we get for our clients is really good. We can prove that, right? We have reviews, we have testimonies. So what would you expect at this price point? Like, what were you expecting? Or how are you comparing our pricing or our rates to someone else in the industry? This is that stop pitching, start listening. I'm kind of going to keep saying it the whole time here. Just listen. Be curious. You might learn something, right? You might hear something that's like, oh wow, that's an interesting perspective, or oh wow, I didn't even think about that. This can also help in your sales process as an opportunity to go, this kind of came up in that worksheet, and as an objection, I've got to figure out how to handle this on the front end. So I'm not sitting here having to kind of work through this in this step of the sales cycle. Second technique is feel, felt, and found. So we see the customer objection. We feel it. Okay. There's some empathy to it. So, okay, I can feel, I see what you're saying. And then there's like this problem solving, which leads to the find. And then there's the close. If an objection comes up again, we just run through this. And it's like, I'm sure everyone has heard the example of, peel the onion. This is peeling the onion. You don't have to change someone's mind by saying, no, this is it. What you have to do is help them come to the decision through the questions you're asking. So in the feel, felt, found technique, with the service is too expensive, that feel is, sure, I can understand why that feels like. I like to see a service, that is desired, but pricing doesn't add up. Okay, I feel that. It's funny because others have kind of felt this before, and there may feel like maybe it's a sticker shock, or maybe it wasn't something you were expecting. But what I've found is when I slow this down and really talk about it, there is an ROI, right? There's a result that we deliver in our practice or in our company. And it really outweighs the cost. Would you be open to kind of hearing more about that? And help me kind of peel this away for you. And now you're like pulling down the guard, right? From someone that's sitting there with their arms crossed, maybe they sit back and they start listening, right? Now it's like it becomes a discussion and less of a sale. Okay, so really quick, I just want to ask a couple questions here, and go ahead and obviously throw into the chat. When we talk about that middle part of the sales funnel, right? And we talk about the steps within your process. I'm going to kind of pull back here. Let's go to the pod. Do you feel within this sales process there has been some sort of pod within every step? Have you slowed that down within the process? And if not, where can you slow that down so that you have those outcomes and you understand those objections? Is there a possibility, as we sit here right now and kind of go over this, do you think that that's an opportunity to control that lever of conversion? Is that something that maybe putting in a little bit of that like effort there to say, oh yeah, this has come up, these are those objections. Let me outline these outcomes based on those objections. So that's something to kind of like consider and think about as you look at and redefine your sales process. Okay, so I want to kind of hit back into these bonus tips here that I wanted to slow down on, and part of that was that trust piece, right? So when you talk, you're only repeating what you know, but when you listen, you learn something new. And so, as I explained before, it's like that curiosity. It's the front end of this, I said, selling to the next step sounds easy. But when you think you know the answer, when you're like, I actually am the best thing for you right now, it's hard to pull back and it's hard to not solve, right? But when you slow down and you listen, you can learn something new and you can uncover maybe more problems or a different problem than what you originally thought was in front of you from this prospect that you can actually solve, and you can build that trust and close that deal. Second tip, objections mean help me. Means I don't know if I understand, right? So there's 4 ways to look at this. We can try to win. Someone there is going to lose, right? It's a win-lose or lose-win situation because you're pulling someone across, right? That trying to win, it becomes a lose-lose because now it's a sale and it's not a consultative, solution-based approach. The trying to solve, that's your win-win. That's that feel, felt, found. That's that LAMA. That's using those techniques to slow down, understand, and actually build the trust to close the deal. And then the last one is based off of this trust triangle. So there's 3 things that kind of have to be achieved, right? There's competency. So do you come across as you know what you're talking about? Do you appear to be the expert? Character. Does the character align? Does your character align with what the client is looking for? Do they like you as a person? And the common sense of purpose. So are you and the client aligned on the purpose that you're trying to accomplish together? And or does the client know this, right? So has this been communicated? So if those 3 things happen, that trust is built. It becomes the center and the core of the relationship. And that can happen really, really early on in the sales process. And that's again, that like stop selling, start listening, slowing down and not trying to push someone to an end goal, and making sure that there's steps that you take to get across the bridge with the flexibility and the understanding and taking consideration of the user experience or the prospect experience, so that this common sense of purpose, this competency, and your character help build trust with that prospect. So I'm going to stop here for a moment. And, my ask at the front of this was to kind of think about, as we go through this, writing down some takeaways. So what are 2 things you do not want to forget from today? Feel, felt, found. Okay, good one. Always sell to the next step. Thanks, Jeff. Don't rush the process, right? Be the bridge. Awesome. When you talk, you're only repeating what you know. That was it's a good quote. I try to keep that one with me. The Pode. Excellent. Okay. Awesome. So, oh, good, Caitlin. That's good. Okay, you're open to make a decision quickly. That's that like confident and healthy like assertiveness, right? Awesome. Okay, those are great takeaways. One thing I'll kind of share with you about the Pode. People don't love that I do this, but I love the Pode. And so I'll actually like define the Pode sometimes in a meeting. I'm like, hey, if you don't take anything else away from today, take the Pode away, because it is an amazing way to kind of make sure you're achieving outcomes. You're aligning with the person you're talking to, and everyone feels like valued and that time is valued in a meeting. So good. I'm glad that was that resonated. Okay. So I want to just kind of slow down and talk about how can we continue to help. So one of the things that we'd love to be able to offer here is we can do some free one-on-one advising. And with this, we could slow down with you as the owner and talk through the business, especially the sales process. There were a few people in here that were like, I don't know my conversion rates. I don't, maybe we can help you fine tune that sales process. We can also take a more holistic approach at the business as well. So this is something that we can definitely be available and continue to help. And then we're going to share with you a Google form. We want you to tell us how we did. And then lastly, I just want to thank you. Thanks for being engaged. Thanks for joining in on those polls. Thanks for throwing into the chat. If you have any questions for me, my email address is up here. I'd love to answer those questions. And I thank you again. Thanks for having me, and thanks for being super active. It was awesome to see all those comments.
Yeah, Morgan, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. I did put a couple slides up on Twitter that really spoke to me, and I see so many people here who were just really resonating with your message. So, from all of us, thank you. And please do go ahead and fill out that form. I will include that when the video link is posted as well. And if you would like a copy of these slides, Morgan, will those be available to attendees?
Sure, I can definitely send those out. And if we want to take the last couple minutes, and if anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer. But yeah, absolutely, Maddy, we can definitely get that out. Okay. But if you could fill out that form too.
Yes, definitely. And I think one of the things, if no one has any questions, or we'll wait for some questions to come in, there was one early on where, someone was commenting, and I don't remember who it was. I apologize. Feel free to comment in the chat if it was you, saying, look, I'm going through the motions. Things aren't necessarily bad. I seem to be, creating new business. The leads have to be a certain quality for that to happen, but I don't really know why they're converting and how to repeat that success. So I had sort of commented, about documenting more and trying to pull out, commonalities. But Morgan, what do you have to say about that?
That is so common, especially as owners, right? We're the expert. We do the thing. We're talking about our service, our product, our business. And then if you have to transfer that knowledge, it gets really hard and really frustrating. And so it is that opportunity, like within the sales process, and each step, that worksheet that's in that deck there is actually really helpful. It's a way to slow down and look at it from two perspectives. Here's the outcomes that I need. Here are the objections that I'm seeing. How can I now make this fit so that it can be transferable, this is why it's working. This is why it's working. I know the objections and I know the outcomes. So therefore I'm kind of hitting it. I'm nailing it, right? If you see though that there's a break in the cycle at some point, use that to go, this is maybe where I'm not quite, I don't know the objections. They're always different. or I don't have clear outcomes.
Right. And, maybe what might make people comfortable if it's going well and you don't want to, throw your entire sales process, for a kilter and say, I'm going to completely start from scratch. Who cares if things are working? I'm just going to start over. There's obviously
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that. But you might find that there are points where things drop off. We're not converting, no matter how well things are going, every single sale. Unless we're Apple, just kidding. But think about, like, in the middle of the sales process, there might be opportunity to pick up that structure and framework. You don't have to start the framework from the very start. So maybe if things do get stalled, you think, well, what's the harm in plugging into that process, right? It may have already been lost. Here's something where the risk is very low. I think we're at this stage. I'm going to start here instead. And that's a really low risk way of sort of incorporating that.
Right, totally. Well, and part of that too, and Maddy, tell me if I'm kind of a little off based on what you're thinking, but there's also this like nurture that happens, right? Life happens sometimes. People fall off, something happens. And if you don't have a nurture, if you don't have like a way to have a touch point to continue through that process so you're not starting from the beginning, that could be an issue. That could be maybe an indicator or a route to where something potentially falls.
Right. And you bring up another good point, which is just because you sort of check your box on step 4 doesn't mean go to step 5, right? There has to be a signal there that invites you to, see that step 5 is the next in your path. You might be stuck at step 4, and that might be where the nurturing is happening. And sometimes our nurturing messaging is off because we assume with all of our email templates that, you were ready to go and now we just need you to sign. But in fact, you need a conversation first. You need to bring that partner into the room and they're not ready to go. And your messaging might be off. And that might also be stalling things because it seems like, back to your point, Morgan, you weren't listening in the beginning. So don't let your email template also betray your good listening, because you lose that personalization that you are accumulating and building trust, again, to the Zig Ziglar point, building trust so that you don't have to overcome that hurdle later on.
Totally. And going back to that trust triangle, right?
Exactly.
Were all 3 of those identified?
Yes. So there's a question from Brad, and he says, how do you suggest dealing with hesitancy and resistance to the question, asking what they expect to pay?
Sure. You make them do it. No. I think so it's that curiosity, right? It doesn't have to be as abrupt or as aggressive as like that question is pretty assertive. But I think, it's just like, hey, just totally curious. Like, what did you expect? Like, is there something, do you feel like I'm really off? Or I think being, this is going to sound like a very dramatic word, but being vulnerable about it, like, oh, wow, okay, I'm super curious. Why? I'd love to hear more about that. Like, what is it that you thought, what did you expect to pay? I think it's okay to do that. Again, that's a pretty aggressive question. But
the tone of voice matters a ton, right?
Totally.
If you change your inflection, you could totally put them on the defensive versus, a vulnerable tone of voice sort of, gets gentler as the sentence goes on, right?
Sure.
So what did you expect to pay? Or, what did you expect to pay versus, well, what did you expect to pay? Those are 2 very different questions as they're received.
Yep. Also, like, well, did you have a budget? And it's like, how far off on your budget is this, right? Or even saying like, wow, that's okay. That's interesting. Let me kind of talk about that. Let me help inform you. Right? I'm a huge believer in educating this person in front of me, because if I'm not the right fit, I do not want to pull them across the line. I've done that a lot of times and it's not a good fit. And the relationship isn't healthy, it works, but it's not like super healthy. And so there's a lot of times where I'll say like, here's what I know, right? And if you're going out there and researching and talking to other people, I want to kind of put you in some framework for this. This is about the average, right? We're kind of in that average. So knowing where you sit in the market is actually really helpful, so that you're not just like, oh, we're too expensive. Like you can really educate and testify to the price and help that person and pull down those guards that they're putting up on that objection.
Well, and I think, I mean, this is a whole nother webinar, Morgan. Maybe we can invite you back for the second subject, which is avoiding the clients you don't necessarily want, but you think you do, so also reading that scene and being able to take in those inputs, which are maybe this is someone who is going to be very challenging to work with, always nickeling and diming, always asking for the next discount, late on their payments. Maybe they don't actually have the funds, and pressuring someone to, maybe not pressuring, but really encouraging someone to get around their hurdles and making this payment could hurt you later on when you struggle to actually get that revenue in the door and have them pay their invoices. So again, listening to your point, what are the signals that they're telling you? Are these objections and they have a reasonable conversation with you and they're indicating in other ways that they have budget that would make sense to be allocated in part to you? Or do they seem to indicate that they're not ready for this, they don't have the funds for it, and it's going to be a struggle if you pressure them to move forward? Sometimes the best client is the client that you don't take, right? Because how much bandwidth are they going to take? And then sometimes it's an opportunity for a referral and you didn't win that sale, but you strengthen another relationship, right? 100%. And they're going to give you those referrals back and you'll make a different sale because someone's going to make a referral to you. So you're almost 100%. Doing an exchange.
And it's that right there is that trust triangle.
Right.
It doesn't mean you close a sale because you have that trust. It means you've just created a really awesome relationship and it'll turn into something else. The best way I could sum up what you just said, Maddy, is get people to follow you, right? They want to follow you. They want to do it. Don't pull people across. It's the last thing, and I'm pretty sure I can probably speak for everyone in here, especially because it's a more relationship. It's not like transactional, right? It's not like you're selling a widget and then walking away.
Right.
You don't want this to be a stressful decision. And if it is, it's a long-term stress point. That's uncomfortable.
Totally.
So get people to follow you.
And not only follow you, but think about the potential for that person who may not be ready, may be ready in the future, may have budget in the future. You could make them a referral partner too. So if you have a great conversation and they see how much value and expertise you have and you demonstrate in just those few conversations, they might go and talk to their business networking group, their friends, they're in a Facebook group, and someone highlights a situation they need help with, and they actually mention you, because even though it wasn't right for me, you might want to talk to Morgan, you might want to talk to Stephanie or Jeff, right? And that is really powerful. So, I think we need to stop necessarily thinking of sales as, just living in a closed room where that first sales conversation happens. Like, sales doesn't exist in a vacuum or in a bubble. It exists in your whole community. And those people you talk to, we know this from online reviews, they talk to others, right? And,
sure.
And they're in those networks. So think about, the bigger picture there and what that relationship can do for you, if not directly, in a network effect.
Sure. And it's that character piece, right? I always mess up this quote, so if someone knows it, go ahead and correct me. But it's something to the point of like, if you're an expert and if you really know what you're doing, there's high confidence, right? You have high confidence, so ego doesn't get in the way. So you could teach that thing to a 10-year-old. The most complex of things you could teach to a 10-year-old because you know it. Go and educate. Don't be afraid of these objections. Take them on. The more people bring objections to me, I'm like, cool, that means you're paying attention. That means you're actually interested because you're having this conversation with me. Let's talk about it. Let me educate you. I'll let you know you're right. This isn't a good fit.
Right.
And that's that character piece. Where like you said, Maddy, that goes a long way. And now that thread, I've just tied a little thread to their shirt. And when they walk away, they're taking that thread with them. And it'll always be there in their mind so that you said, you know what? You got to talk to Morgan or you got to talk to Maddy. they trust you, even
Yes.
if they didn't work with you.
Totally. And I mean, Anna just made a great point. Thank you so much for bringing that up. People always remember how you made them feel. Why is it the case that on Yelp, people are getting 2-star reviews for service, even though the food is fantastic and there's nothing more infuriating? I mean, we see this all the time with Smith.ai. You've got people who say, I couldn't get through to the business, 1-star review. It's like, well, that's a phenomenal 50-year running law firm, but they just got a 1-star review because no one can get through to them. It is about the experience. So think about that, and think about also, how are you setting expectations in the beginning for the experience you're delivering in your sales meetings, in those conversations. Like your brand and the communication level matters throughout, and that should feel consistent, because that also goes to that experience from the beginning to the end. Morgan made me feel, like she was in tune with me, and even though it wasn't the right fit, or this is why I ended up going with her, like positive or negative.
Correct.
You're seeing that common thread and harmony, and people will pick up on that when they read your reviews and they say, wow, everyone's saying that Morgan is a really great listener and that she is an expert and in tune with the needs of her clients. How much more likely are you to just get calls that are easier to close because they don't need so much pitching? They're already projecting onto you what you're going to do for them. Right.
Yeah.
Well, Morgan, thank you so much. Glad to have you here for the hour with us, and hopefully we'll get you back here soon. I think there's a lot more to discuss, as is evident, and we will share those resources with you all shortly after this program. So everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day. Morgan, thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye.